Today we are going to explore Oman, a oil-rich country in the Persian Gulf. Very interesting the position of Oman because it's close to the Strait of Hormuz, which is very influential in all the oil going through there. So basically, if that strait were to be blocked, a lot of the oil from UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all those countries would actually get blocked, wouldn't be available. But Oman is actually on the other side of that strait, so a very influential position in the world in that sense. Oman used to have a very big maritime empire, much more influential in shape and size than it is today. They had some control in Iran, they had some control even down as far as Africa. I can quickly show you a map of this to give you a bit of an appreciation of it. This is the 18th century, I believe. Can we get, yeah, 18th to 19th century influence. You can see how much more influence they had as a maritime empire in their heyday. Then the British kind of became more influential on the maritime front, and they had some treaties with Oman, and things changed over time. Um, that made them kind of like a de facto colony of Britain. That's something I've been reading up anyway on the different articles I've been reading. Let's take a quick look at some of the nice images from the country. Some very beautiful architecture. Of course, I think there may also be some human rights issues in Oman, similar to Saudi Arabia, which needs to be mentioned in the video. But other than that, I'm going to concentrate on the economics and on the landscape stuff. But I always want to mention that as well. So let's just take a look at this. So we have a country that is oil rich, and because it's oil rich, there were disputes about this region here. If I could just get the name come up here, the town, yeah. So the Barami Oasis. I read up a little bit about this. Basically, the Saudis and the UAE Arabs, everybody wanted to get oil. I think it was around the 1950s. When I got the dates here exactly for the Barami dispute. The Barami dispute, also known as the Barami War, was a series of covert attempts by Saudi Arabia to influence the loyalties of tribes and communities in the oil-rich Barami Oasis in the 1940s, 1950s, which culminated in an armed conflict between forces of the Saudi Arabia army on one side and Oman and the UAE, formerly known as the Trucial States at the time, on the other side. And yeah, I read through this. It was quite interesting. I actually recommend you reading through a lot of this stuff. Just the actual maneuvers and stuff were quite interesting, but yeah, too long to go through in this video. But I just wanted to highlight that about this one town here. We have this kind of land border, and yet it's like one town. Just these UAE side's a lot more developed, in my opinion, from what we can see from the sky. A lot more buildings and stuff like that. This is also interesting, but like a football pitch going up, or some sort of sports area, perhaps for running. I'm not entirely certain, but in general, it just is curious how the town is split right down the middle with this border, and I wanted to see why that was the case. There's also this pretty interesting. If you go here, I thought this was a runway, but this is actually a landfill area just outside that town. Just wanted to highlight that because it looked interesting. The map's kind of a bit crazy there. This is a bit further deeper into the countryside in Oman, and just kind of highlighting the way the dwellings look like. I thought it was quite interesting to see in general. If we just go back here for a moment to Barai though, or Barami, if that's how it's even pronounced, Al Barami, I wanted just to highlight again how small the dwellings look on the Oman side, a lot smaller, a lot less densely populated compared to the the UAE side. Other interesting things that I wanted to look at primarily are the oil fields, and we're going to get to that in a minute. I want to probably look at the Wikipedia article for a little bit more before I do that. This is just the border crossing again at El Barami into the Saudi Arabian side, big fancy border crossing, and that's one of the oil fields. We get back to that in a minute. We can close this section on the Barami dispute. Another dispute is these islands between Yemen and Oman. They're actually still contested as far as I understand. Let me close this here. A group of 5 islands in the Arabian Sea, 40 kilometers off the southeast coast of Oman. In 1854, the Sultan of Muscat is the capital of Oman, presented the islands as a present to Queen Victoria, and yeah, the responsibility was given to British India. There was some concern at the time that the deed of secession was null since the Sultan had no rights over the archipelago. The Red Sea India Telegraph Company tried to use it as a telegraph base, but it failed because the cable failed there. And then a group of Liverpool entrepreneurs were granted monopoly rights to harvest basically manure from animals there. That it was very, it's called guano, and it's very useful for fertilizer. But there was resistance from local inhabitants, and after they mined 200,000 tons, they left the operation. Which was a very interesting little fact about these islands. Let's quickly get a picture of where these islands actually are, because I didn't do that yet, and I wanted just to highlight it since there is an ongoing kind of question about who, just an ongoing dispute about who should have those islands. Here are the islands themselves. Let's go to the satellite mode. Let's turn off this. Let's turn on that. And you can see there their location just off the coast. Of course, there is a war in Yemen at the moment between the Houthi rebels and Saudi Arabia, and that of course means that since Yemen has a border with Oman, and things that happens in Yemen, including these island disputes and stuff, is very meaningful. That is Yemen. There, we'll do a video on Yemen at some point in the future. But yeah, I wanted to highlight those islands because there's some interesting controversy around them. If we continue back now to the official Wikipedia page, yeah, it talks about the location, a lot of borders: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Yemen, maritime borders with Iran and Pakistan. Oman is about 5 million people with demographics, very interesting demographic shape. Look at that, that's a very weird demographic pyramid. More men than women, which is always a bit concerning in the Arab states why that is the case. And just weird that they have this kind of little pocket here. Why is that there? I didn't really get around to finding that out. So to do with a war or a famine or something like this, I couldn't actually figure that out. There's a question in my mind: why is there that big collapse in population for those couple of years and then the growth again? We do have a quite healthy fertility rate at 2.7 children per woman. And when we look at the economy, there are some hints towards Omanization, trying to get all these people to work in this economy, not just getting foreign labor in to do the skilled jobs. And that population growth is very important and influential in that. I do think I have that highlighted here somewhere. The Omanization program has been in operation since basically 2000, working towards replacing expatriates with trained Omani personnel. The goal of this initiative is to provide jobs for the rapidly growing Omani population. The state has allotted subsidies for companies to hire local employees, not only to gradually reduce the reliance on foreign workers, but also to get people to work in private companies, because people want to work in the Omani government jobs because it's probably very comfortable and very good for people to do that. And it's similar to Saudi Arabia, where the state kind of runs the country because all the money is from oil and the government owns the oil companies, and that's where all the money is, that's where all the jobs are coming from. So why wouldn't you want to work there? Yeah, I have something else in the economy on the top here. Let's quickly look at this. When oil was discovered in the 1960s, the economy switched from what was just fishing and trading to basically towards oil, much more heavier. Production and export increased significantly from 1964 onwards. Yeah, they want to diversify, but there's talk of diversification. Like, I mean, oil is basically what they have. Petroleum is responsible for 64% of all export revenue, basically half of government income and half of GDP of the country, which is yeah, pretty not so diversified, you have to say. Main export partners, so most of the oil going to China, India, and South Korea, but basically China yeah, needs to fuel its huge economy so that it can sell all those manufactured goods. Main import partners, again, the UAE, and we've seen the UAE being listed very often on countries' import and export lists where I wouldn't have expected to see them. But again, this finally makes a bit more sense because they're actually bordering that country. Saudi Arabia makes sense. India, China also makes sense there as well. Don't think there's anything else in the economy side I wanted to talk about. Yeah, that was just the oil numbers there. In the here, yeah, a little bit about here about how the Omani Sultanate Empire was basically fighting with the Portuguese and the British for control of the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. Talking about the way they had influence all the way as far as Zanzibar in Africa. Then yeah, kind of coming out of control of the UK for 103 years. They used their relations to benefit each other. I wonder how much that was 50-50. I wonder how about that. Formerly maritime empire, Oman is the oldest continuous independent state in the Arab world, which is also a noteworthy fact. Do we have a number for that? It would be nice to see how long. Don't see it there now. Let's continue. In 2010, the UN ranked Oman as the most improved country in the world in terms of development during the preceding 40 years. So all these were, of course, quite poor tribal countries. So oil's basically just made big advancements. Now we look at some of the oil now and some of the oil infrastructure. I've looked at oil in Libya before and in Saudi Arabia. This one's a bit different. I just hadn't seen so many of these black pits in such a nice square shape. The ones in Libya are really much more messy, the oil kind of ponds. Here we have some of the oil infrastructure. The oil company, I think it's like 30% owned by Shell, and the rest almost is exclusively owned by the Oman monarchy or government. We have a lot of different oil pits here, and it's just a massive, like this is just a huge network of oil rigs, oil drills and derricks. Look at that. I mean, they're all basically just carbon copies of each other, pumping oil. Yeah, a lot of oil being sent out there. It's just a massive area. Like, this is a huge expansion. This 5 kilometers. Yeah, so this is like, we zoom right in. I don't know if you can see the legend in the top left corner, but yeah, basically this is like hundreds of kilometers of space of oil being harvested. there is another oil well over here, oil field over here. Let me get the picture to crystallize for us into better quality. Yep. Here are just some of the buildings around these massive oil plants. And here we have some interesting infrastructure as well. Let's go to one of the other oil places. This was an interesting one, just an interesting pit. Didn't figure out what this was, but yeah, interesting shapes again, and oil being stored there. Between all these lovely sand dunes, I might use this as my thumbnail because these sand dunes are really quite extraordinary. The colours, the oranges on them. But this oil being harvested in and around these sand dunes. We have some oil wells there again. Let's close some of these tabs because the image is really taking too long to render. I think that'll be helping us along. We might just close one or two of these ones here as well. Let's close that. The oasis, the island. Good. We'll continue again. Here we are. The other thing about this oil area was there were these very weird buildings. I think it's these ones. I didn't figure out what these were either. They look like they're part of the oil production. That looks like solar on top of what are like factory buildings. That's my guess at the moment. But why would you build these factory buildings? Is there oil production happening inside these buildings? Why cover it up? I didn't really get it. And there's so many of these, like they're very modular looking. And really they're tied into, there must be a central pipeline and central road right here. Again, apologies for the rendering time. That's definitely a road. There's some sort of electricity line being brought there. That could be pipelines under the ground there. Yeah, interesting infrastructure. I always like highlighting these things that just seem interesting. Even if I don't have the answers for what they actually are, they just seem very cool. And I'm assuming they're part of the oil infrastructure in Oman. You can see here something similar, just without the actual buildings in place. This reminded me of, I thought first that these were palm trees, but now I'm just downright confused. I don't think they are palm trees, but they look like palm trees. Maybe for dates harvesting, some possibility, because there is a lot of dates eaten in Arab countries, and Oman is no exception to that. It's my understanding. Okay, we can skip on to one of the other ones here. This is a marble mine. Marble being quite a nice rock. You make fancy things out of it. Quite expensive if it has nice colors in it. And these are massive, massive marble blocks, I believe, being basically cut out of the rock and being lined out there for transport to other parts of the country, maybe even internationally. Being sent here is the mine itself. There was a second mine. This was pretty cool too. This is almost like Egyptian pyramid blocks of rock being laid out to build a pyramid somewhere, but of course that isn't the case. Maybe more modern pyramids. Here you can see the blocks, how they're coming out of the rock, being being excavated, being mined out. I thought that was pretty cool to see. Just lots of this stuff going on all over the place. Here we have the actual lines where the actual marble is being cut out. You can see the cliff face there, as it were. We saw some of these mines before in one of the UK videos, I believe, or was it maybe the one in Norway? Quite possible. Here is a factory for that marble production, and again we see marble being placed outside it before it goes in for being created into more finished products, I suppose. Again, we can close these tabs and continue to the last tab here. This is a salt factory, I don't know, salt production place on the southern eastern coast of Oman. My opinion is that they take seawater and let it evaporate, and then the salt is then available afterwards. That's the way salt production, I think, normally works. Here we have other pits for this production as well. That looks like water could come in there. I don't know how tidal this area is, but it definitely is, yeah, very low to the sea level. I know that is low to the sea level because when we look at the map here for climate change data, this area is red, which means it's below the annual flood level going into the future, so it's quite close to the water. It's actually the only part, this kind of general area is the only part close to the sea in that sense. If we go back here for a moment, you'll probably recognize this shape here, this Gobat Hashish Gulf shape. That is the only part that seems to be threatened by climate change. Everything else is pretty safe. We go to Muscat, which is where most of the people live, and we can turn our map up to like way into the future, which means we're going for more extreme measures on the rise in sea level, letting the map generate. And there is a bit happening on the coastline there, but it really isn't anything to be that frightened of for the high population in Muscat. If we bring our map density, population density, you can see how dense the population is in Muscat. So it will be important for them to not get flooded anytime soon. So that's good news for them. In terms of maritime sea cables, a lot of sea cable connections into Oman. Yeah, I'm not even going to count how many that is. A lot of connectivity for that part of the world. Let's quickly run through these indicators and then I'll finish up. Oman, relatively stable country, 137th out of 180 countries roughly, so pretty stable compared to its neighbour, which is the 6th most fragile country in the world. Saudi Arabia ranking much more in the middle, but Oman definitely doing well. This is a bit more interesting. You have the energy. We have Oman producing 3.7 quadrillion BTU and only consuming about 1.4. All that's going to be in the oil sector and gas sectors. Here we have gas 1.4 and oil 2.2, and they're only consuming 0.9 and 0.4. A lot of gas consumption, which is actually a bit interesting because their electricity is indeed being produced by gas. 30% of electricity in Oman comes from gas. All the rest of it is saying it's from unknown. It might be from importation from places like UAE that uses nuclear, or it could just be oil, but it's a bit interesting how much is unknown based on this particular indicator here. But yeah, it's just interesting to see that. Going back to data, they don't actually have much data beyond that date. In terms of doing business rankings, do we have, okay, Oman. I think it was somewhere in the 60s. Just scroll up here a small bit. Yeah, 68. So kind of in the middle. On the same line as Colombia and Ukraine and Vietnam. So not that special, but also not that terrible. In terms of freedom, ranking pretty badly at 24. If it is still an absolute monarchy, let me just Google that. Oman monarchy. That's spelled incorrectly, but you know what I mean. Is a hereditary monarchy with a population of 3.3 million. So that's the reason why freedom isn't as highly ranked there, partly, and also political rights and rights of women and things like that, and I imagine would also counter into that. Then we have here, this is, I believe, GDP per capita, pretty relatively high for compared to Yemen, but pretty low compared to Saudi Arabia and very low compared to the UAE. But still 39,000 is pretty good. But that's all the oil money, of course, in the country. This is debt, government debt. Is at 35%, so almost 40% of GDP, and it used to be much higher. According to the economics page, it actually said it used to be up to 90. This page here is saying it was up to 67 in 2019. So a bit of a discrepancy on that one, but it used to be up as far as 96. Oh, that's Saudi Arabia, sorry. My apologies. Blue is Saudi Arabia. I was just graphing that against Oman. Oman has peaked at 67 in 2019, just before the COVID fiasco, and it's now down to 35. So actually quite good recovery there, and it's actually projected to go underneath Saudi Arabia's. Saudi Arabia, of course, also done a quite good job in reducing their debt with all their oil money. This is government primary expenditure, so how much the government spending of the amount of money of GDP in the country. They're 27, which is kind of the average in that area in general. And in terms of inflation, their currency is actually pegged to the US dollar. Their inflation at the moment is 0.7, which is quite good for them at the moment. Nothing big there. One kind of more sad thing, because whenever a country has to have a lot of military spending, is actually a sad thing because it reflects a difficult situation. We have 12%, 10%, 9%, 10% up to 2020 of GDP being spent on military stuff, which, yeah, some countries do that. With Yemen and the war going on there and stuff like that, it's maybe understandable. But yeah, that's also worth understanding just how high that is in the country. Good, that's my video on Oman. I ran through the indicators. I thought it was quite interesting to see the oil fields as always in these Arab countries, and I hope you enjoyed the video.